Hi everyone, I'm Peter Jones. So I work for the Whamcloud division at DDN, and so we're focused on the Lustre parallel file system. So I've worked on the Lustre project since 2006 through a number of different companies, and this is branded as OpenSFS, which maybe you know is the Lustre community organization, and so I'm one of the leads of the Lustre working group, and we are involved in activities relating to the Lustre community releases. So regardless of all the different people who use Lustre in different contexts, everyone relies on these releases. So the Lustre working group is a forum where people come together to collaborate and exchange ideas on what we need to do with future releases. So right now the current release, LTS release, is the 2.12 release. We're putting out, we just put out the 2.12.3 release that added support for a number of different Linux distributions, new versions of MoFed, and we will be doing another release before the end of the year, 2.12.4 release. The major release we're working on at the moment is 2.13. So this is in release testing at the moment. We have RC1 testing, should be finished soon, and so hopefully we should be out by the end of the month. Probably the most standout feature on this release is the persistent client cache. So this is a capability where you can take advantage of fast local storage on your clients. And if you have a workload where you have a number of files where things are very segregated, maybe for an AI workload or genomics workload, you're doing a lot of repeated reads of the same group of small files that other clients are not accessing at that time, and then when the job is finished, the results will be flushed back to the main namespace where they're more freely available to the anyone else who wants to use them. So there's actually a paper on this tomorrow being presented as part of a workshop that's called Fewer Tiers, Fewer Tiers. I think I have it on a later slide with that on, but it's I think 4 o'clock tomorrow if you want to go along and see more detail about that. Also overstriping, this is one of those things as we've evolved, we found with IO 500 runs that people running with all flash file systems were not getting quite the performance they expected, and when we looked into it, there was a limitation that restricted you to just having one stripe per device, and that assumption, which was necessary in the past, is no longer the case. And so that feature again has been useful for people with faster storage to get real performance improvements. And we saw some of the higher numbers of Lustre on the IO 500 were leveraging that capability. So for the 2.13 release, we have, as you see, there's quite a diverse group of organizations who are all contributing to the release. I will highlight SUSE, who are in there as a fairly significant contributor. But there's, like I said, I think it's 25 different organizations for the 2.13 release. And also noteworthy here is this is the first release where we've had contributions from multiple cloud service providers. So both AWS and Alibaba had contributions in this release. Oh, and so here's comparing these statistics of the amount of change and the organizations in the 2.13 release versus releases through the years. So the 1.8 release was just about 10 years ago, and this was at the point where the core Lustre team were at Oracle via an acquisition, and at that point we had a contributor agreement that you had to sign to make any contributions to the code, and as a result, all the work for that release came from the Oracle Corporation, engineers employed by Oracle. And now since we shifted away from there, and we have a more diverse community, the copyrights, we have a contribution model that's similar to the Linux kernel, so the copyright is completely polluted, and we just have a great deal more diversity of organizations who are participating in the Lustre project. We're also looking at 2.14 as our next major release, and we're looking to have generally newer Linux distributions supported, newer versions of ZFS that are currently shipping as well. This is, basically leaning forward, making this a cutting-edge release, and then when we're sure those things are stable, we'll backport those support into the LTS releases. Interesting features in that release, I think perhaps a standout is pull quotas. We have quotas at the moment for users, groups, and projects, but pull quotas gives you the option to close a quota on a storage pool. If you, for example, have a smaller amount of flash and the rest is disks, you don't want to have certain users hogging up all of the more expensive resources. Here's the latest Lustre roadmap from Lustre.org, showing the sort of timings of the various releases, and looking forward even to the 2.15 release, where we think that'll be. So 2.14 probably late summer, and 2.15 in early 2021. And some other interesting stuff I hadn't mentioned previously, but native encryption in Lustre, we have done made some good progress there, and that's something that will allow you to have a key for the client where you're writing your data, and then on the wire and where the data is stored on disk, all the data will be encrypted, and only that client with that key will be able to unencrypt that data. So one of the activities that SUSE is most involved in, and is in fact driving this initiative, is getting the Lustre client accepted into the upstream Linux kernel. So Neil Brown, who's an experienced kernel maintainer working for SUSE, is driving this initiative and hosting the Git repository with the code in. I believe there's a great deal of contribution from Oak Ridge National Lab as well on this initiative, and a number of other parties, but those are the two main organizations really driving this. Also, we do continually push our patches upstream where we do make any kernel changes, and so whereas LDiskFS is based on ext4, and that had been some very large patches in the past, those have now been upstreamed, and there's a very small delta now, and so we are keeping much more pace with the upstream version of the E2FS progs, and there's it does look like feasible in the future we might have a completely vanilla E2FS progs that you could use with your master file system. In the cloud, I mentioned already AWS and AliCloud contributing to the community release. There is a number of different vendors have solutions out there. This is one of the big growth areas for Lustre usage at the moment, as well as AIs and whatnot. Also mentioning the IML project. So this started life as a proprietary software at Intel, and it was Intel Manager for Lustre, and now we have a backronym because it's Intel's no longer involved in this project. It has been open source for several years. The software has been running in production at hundreds of sites for some years, but newer versions, now being open source and freely available, has increased the adoption of this software, and we're starting to see a bit of a development community develop there. So with contributions coming in from outside my engineering organization. So the 5.1 release for IML just came out last week, and that added support for the latest Lustre 2.12.3 release, and also some general improvements with deploying with command line interface. So this slide I just put in for a bit of fun, really. This is not, as it claims, pictures of Lustre developers at the launch. It's actually Pong developers at the launch. But this was something that was sent to a friend of mine by a salesperson for a competing technology. And I think their intention was to suggest that, because Lustre had been around a long while, it was a bit, old-fashioned and not as cool as the technology they were promoting. But to me, I think the exact opposite. I think the fact that Lustre, has been around 20 years, it has continually had to evolve through as different technologies have changed, and continue to provide very the most extreme performance and but also develop and get more robust. So it's now not used just in stretch situations, it's used for mission critical data. And so, and I think, the open source license has been a real key factor in that, because that has meant that people have been able to continue to participate in the project as things have changed with organizations, and that people are more motivated to contribute because they feel like they still have ownership of that, the end work afterwards. And so this presentation, this URL here, and I stole this graphic from this presentation, was our CTO Andreas Dilger, who's worked on the project since its inception in 1999. He did this presentation at an I/O workshop at ISC, and it was right on the last day, and not that many people went to go, but he dug through his archives, and he's a bit of a pack rat, and he pulled out lots of old photos and early information, and then also sort of has a more forward-looking view of where Lost is going long term. So it's definitely a very entertaining talk, and well worth seeking out if you have any interest in Lustre. And just to mention the Lustre user group this year, they have announced the dates. It's a little bit later than usual. It's in June, not April as usual. The reason for that is it's being hosted at a university, and so we're setting the dates at a time when the students are not in, so we can use the facilities. This is always a very interesting event, lots of interesting presentations, but also a good chance to network with other people who have an interest in Lustre. And that was what I had. I will stick around afterwards if anyone has any questions, but I think that's it.